Welcome back to my channel, and again, happy borderline personality disorder month. This is now the third week of BPD awareness month, and so I figured that today we should focus on an important topic, which is highly sensitive people versus BPD. Okay, I think that there's a lot of us out there who are very sensitive emotionally speaking and maybe have been labeled as having certain disorders because that's what the DSM is great at doing. It really categorizes people in these really tight boxes of this is who you are and this is everyone who has the same thing has all of these things and you are now another number and we're just going to toss you in there and you have this diagnosis now, okay? I do think that there are things beyond a diagnosis that exist out there, and even beyond that, I think that it's possible for maybe some of you or people out there to be highly sensitive people, HSP, okay, for short, HSP, but not necessarily have BPD per se, or you might have really sensitive traits and some slight tendencies in BPD symptoms without having a full diagnosis. So we're going to be talking about that, the differences, the similarities, so that you can gain a better understanding about yourself, because this is what this month is about. BPD Awareness Month is about developing not only awareness about BPD, but about insight into your own lives. So what is BPD? If you have been following my channel for the past couple of years, you probably have a really good understanding of what BPD is now, but for those of you just joining us today, welcome. BPD is a personality disorder which is found in the cluster B personality disorders within the DSM. Okay, there are 9 primary symptoms, so things such as a fear of abandonment, mood swings, impulse control issues, dissociation, suicide, suicidal ideations, okay, self-harm, feelings of emptiness that we see a lot with those who have BPD, difficulty maintaining healthy relationships. And with BPD, okay, we do see this high emotional sensitivity, really sensitive to environment changes, to other people's tone of voice, body language, to our own internal processes, hormones, foods that we're eating maybe. So if we're ingesting too much caffeine, for example, we might feel really anxious and agitated, maybe more so than other people. Okay, so there is fundamental, real sensitivity to folks who do have BPD. My question is, does it mean, right, automatically that if you are highly sensitive that you do have BPD? So what is a highly sensitive person, or HSP, as I had said earlier? This is someone who processes information more deeply and profoundly from the environment or from other people than someone else would, okay? So this means that this is someone that when there is stress or anger, irritability, that they really pick up on those things in the environment and they feel it really deeply and intensely, more so than the average person, okay? So what is the difference between being a highly sensitive person and having BPD? One of the first differences that I will note is when we look at the stimulus for the reactions, okay? Oftentimes with BPD, the stimulus, while yes, there is obviously sensitivity to external stimuli, there's also a deep sensitivity to internal stimulus, as I had said, right? So hormones, thoughts, sensations, there is a deep attunement to those things. So whenever a thought goes by, we get really stuck to it and we might spiral in the thought. We have anxious sensations, so whatever that looks like for you, right? Maybe there's a tightness in your chest, or you get an upset stomach, or you get warm or jittery. There's a really deep sensitivity to those internal processes as well as the external ones. But for people who are highly sensitive, so HSP, they react more strongly to these external stimuli, okay? Again, so walking into a room, someone is agitated, picking up on this stress, almost carrying that stress, becoming that stress, right? So we feel everything really deeply. And a lot of it, though, is sensitivity to this environment. So all of that really has to do with the reactions to things. So why those individuals are reacting the way that they do. BPD, there's a high focus on this internal processing of feelings and sensations, obviously as well with the external environment. And for those who are HSP, they have this deep attunement to the environment, which then impacts how they then internalize those things and feel in the moment, okay? And you might be wondering, well, the distinction doesn't seem that big or that important. You're correct in saying that, because obviously it could go both ways for both, and which leads me to my next point, which is being emotional doesn't mean or equate to having BPD, okay? Very, very, very important, because if you are just someone who cries easily or who picks up on anxiety or who is an empath, right? We feel empathy, but to a level that's almost ineffective because we get stuck in those feelings of, I'm feeling everything that they're feeling. This doesn't mean that you have BPD, right? It doesn't mean that you have all of the other symptoms that accompanies this deep emotional sensitivity. I know a lot of people who are really sensitive and who have other diagnoses, right? ADHD, for example, we have a deep sensitivity to our environment, to feelings, there's a dysregulation of mood, and they have something completely different, okay? So again, it's important for you to look at the things that you're dealing with, and even the term BPD, I think that there is room for improvement on that word and even that definition. I think that what they're striving to do is, within the newer versions of the DSM, they're wanting the personality disorders to be more personality traits and or symptoms. Those are things that we can change or work on, whereas a diagnosis often feels like a life symptom or sentence, a life sentence, okay? But with highly sensitive people, if you're someone, again, who's emotional, it doesn't mean that you have impulse control issues, or it doesn't mean that if you're highly sensitive that you have self-harm issues or suicidal ideations or all of the other symptoms, okay? Which leads me to my third point, which is really this stable versus unstable sense of self. You could be someone who is highly sensitive, who has a stable sense of self, right? You know who you are, you know your values fundamentally. That does not fluctuate despite the fact of you being sensitive, whereas those who have more of those BPD traits or symptoms, we might see a bit more variance in the way that they feel about themselves. There might be more feelings of emptiness or feeling lost all the time because they don't have this core sense of self. I do think that, generally speaking, most, if not all, people who have BPD also have emotional sensitivity, but again, it's not because you are emotionally sensitive that you have BPD. Leading me to my final and last point, which is how do we move from BPD to HSP? Because you might be wondering, how do I work on this, okay? I think that you're not gonna like the answer, but this is something that takes a lot of time. Think about how many years it took you to learn to be the way that you are. Give yourself a bit of grace and compassion and understanding that it's going to take some time to relearn how to be open or how to be vulnerable or how to be receptive and trusting, because at some point in your life, when you were maybe 1 year old or 2 or 3, you were those things. You were really curious and you were open and you were giving with your love and open to receiving it and trusting. And so it's, can we go back to that time? Can we relearn those things that we have lost along the way? I really believe that it's important for us to start talking about these things and to start talking about how it's okay to be emotionally sensitive. And it doesn't mean that because you are sensitive that you automatically have a disorder or a diagnosis or that there's something fundamentally wrong with you. And even BPD, right? I'm hoping that in the future, the name can be changed and the way that we talk about the presentations can change, and the language around symptoms and traits can change, because sometimes the way that those things have been conceived, it feels like a death trap, that we are stuck with this thing forever, when in reality, it's really not what that is. I would love to hear from all of you, so make sure to leave me a comment down below. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me today. I wish you all the best week, and I will see you next time for another episode of On the Line.